What's going on, guys? I'm Tyler, and I'm here to let you know that 9 Days is no perfect movie. So, 9 Days takes place in this world of pre existence, pre life, before life. I don't know what religions call it. I have no idea if religions even talk about this stuff all that much, but it centers on a former human named Will, played by Winston Duke, who must interview five unborn souls, played by Zazie Beetz, Tony Hale, Bill Skarsgård, David Rysdahl, and Perry Smith, and decide which one of them is worthy to have a life on Earth with the help of his best friend and assistant, Benedict Wong. And this is a movie that I honestly have no idea what to feel. As I was watching it, I never thought it was a bad movie, but at the same time, there were few and far between moments where I actually felt emotional for the characters and their struggles. And even when I did, it wasn't because I was so invested in what was happening, it was because the events playing out reminded me of some personal setbacks I've experienced the past year and a half that admittedly I haven't resolved or either had resolved, but just all of a sudden I was reminded of the pain and suffering that came with it. But obviously, I can't fault Edson Oda for that, so I'm not going to downgrade the movie for those coincidences of all things. But always sticking with the positives, the actors do a hell of a lot of work and really surprised me in some cases. Winston Duke, through this stilted body posture and severely withdrawn facial expressions, was so effective at playing a man who was so repressed in his pain and suffering, not just in his previous life, but just having the job of watching other people live life on Earth suffer immensely, and he has absolutely no way to help or comfort them. He can only take notes and just feel sorry and just try to drown it out as much as he can by watching the more positive memories that he has. And the movie's not afraid to call him out whenever he decides to play God in the most unfair circumstances because of all the tragedy he's experienced. If someone reminds him of his own pain and suffering or questions his outlook on what life is or what life should be, he'll instantly erase them from the entire process. And some of the best moments are whenever a character is challenging his own belief systems and he's having such a hard time trying to neglect or ignore their own thoughts and feelings. And some of those moments, he can be a little too unlikable. And even when he lashes out, Duke's performance is so restrained that he does a lot of things that just don't make sense. Whenever he's supposed to be angry, he doesn't actually yell or scream at anyone, which I thought was just took me out of it, even for a fantasy movie like this. But at the same time, his arc isn't about agreeing with what he believes in. It's about trying to understand who he was as a person and how that reflects on him now that he gets to decide who lives and who disappears. Benedict Wong was absolutely excellent. Maybe my favorite performance of his as someone who, just having one conversation with him, you would swear he should be the one calling the shots. He has this much more, for lack of a better term, down to earth outlook towards life and people that makes him much more empathetic. But without spoiling anything, he's never lived on Earth and he never will. So it's one of those unfortunate things that makes you question who gets to deserve certain levels of power and why. Tony Hale, massive surprise. I've never liked him as an actor just because he always plays the most desperately needy of characters ever. But here, what makes him so likable is that he's able to bring levity to even the darkest of situations with a sense of humor, which obviously doesn't go so well with the selection process, but at the same time, in his final scene where he gave one hell of a monologue that I had no idea he had in him, it's incredibly clear that his sense of humor is just a defense mechanism for all the suffering that he and numerous other people experience, and also as a way to challenge what human behavior is expected of us and how it actually is. It's the reason any comic risks their own reputation to tell their most offside material ever. And Zazie Beetz absolutely stole the show. I loved every scene that she was in. I loved how she's able to nonchalantly question Will's outlooks towards life in a way that never comes across as rebellious, more out of this sense of curiosity, because Will wants every soul that he interviews to echo his own black or white moral compass. But when it comes down to her, whenever she watches the memories that he's collected and tries to question every possible outcome, she looks for every optimistic or even pacifistic way of trying to resolve a dark situation. Like when she sees this clip of a kid that Will selected be bullied, he gives her this either you fight back or you do nothing. And she goes, well, I would talk to them. that's not going to work. I'd still talk to them. Great idea. Just, you root for her the most because even though you've personally tried these experiences and they've failed numerous times, you know that there are times where it actually succeeded. She has that if it can, you must try it first outlook that makes her so easy to root for. And she's obviously the soul that you want to be chosen. And there's a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot of, but there are some definitely good moments where you feel like she gets unjustifiably screwed because of how ignorant and in denial Will is. And Edson Oda, as a director, in his own debut of all things, definitely shows that he has a refreshing, unique, and original style. And I look forward to seeing what he does in his next film because he incorporates a lot of original techniques that I haven't seen in that many indie movies, let alone in high budget blockbusters. My favorite one is when we as an audience get to experience the memories of the other souls that Will has chosen through these VHS tapes that are filmed from the character's own POV. So it has this voyeuristic but also nostalgic feel to it whenever we're watching them. And I love every time they cut back and forth from the memories to Will's reactions just to show how proud or remorseful he is for having selected them in the first place. When he goes through the interview process by talking to each soul one at a time, which we'll get to later, I do like that as opposed to focusing on one scene being one interview and then the next scene being the next. I like that it starts off with him asking one character a question and then the next character will answer that for them, and so on and so forth. It made the pacing flow a lot more naturally, and it also made the selection process more unpredictable. And when we do get to see the outside of this pre-existence world, the use of wide shots makes this desert landscape so gorgeous to look at, but also feels dreary because of how vast and empty and unclear the answers are. But at the same time, the unclear answers over what this pre-existence world was part of the problem. I didn't like that we didn't get to explore this world enough or really even get to understand what the rules of it are. This movie leaves a lot of questions up for interpretation, and normally I'm all for that. But in my opinion, the questions here that are open-ended, I felt were the worst ones to leave open-ended. For example, how do humans who have already lived on Earth get to this world and get to be chosen to decide who lives and who disappears? What qualifications do you need in order to be chosen for something like this? How are these souls even created in the first place? How do they know who to go to in order to be chosen? And if they don't get chosen, why do they have to disappear? Couldn't they wander around for years or decades on end without ever getting chosen and leading to a lot of psychological trauma? Wouldn't that be a little bit more impactful? If they already have this strict by the book moral code on what their opinion of life is before they're even exposed to it, is that really their fault, or is it God's fault for not even noticing that when he created them, assuming God is the one creating them, or if God is the one pulling the strings? And this was the big one for me. If souls who don't get to live disappear, why is one of the central characters a spirit who never lived on Earth but has been around for fucking ever? I know some people are going to look at these questions and think that I'm overanalyzing them, and I can completely understand why, but for me, there weren't enough clues as to what these answers could be. I didn't feel like I was given enough to make my own mind about it or even justify some of the inconsistency or lack of explanation. It would be one thing if the world building in this movie was cool, and once in a while the old school technology was interesting. The fact that Will actually watches memories through old TVs with VHS tapes or has to recreate memories through woodwork in order to create sets and such. But after a while, it just gets old. I know the movie was on a budget, but with the A-list talented cast who have done several big budget stuff, I felt like you could have gotten a little more supernatural or sci-fi, whatever it is they were going for, than the movie actually was. But for me, the biggest problem of 9 Days was the structure that Oda incorporates into his own script. It felt all over the place, and in my opinion, didn't take that many advantages with the premise as it could have. For one, it isn't until Will says, it's been this amount of days, or your time is almost up, that we even know what day we're on. They didn't put up captions for, like, this is day 2, or this is day 3, which that would have been a hell of a lot easier, and it wouldn't have taken away anything from the narrative. Second, this was the big one for me. Oda makes what is, in my opinion, a huge mistake by not having any of the other souls meet each other up until Will has to make the final decision. In my opinion, it would have been a much more impactful drama if we got to see 5 souls who don't want to compete with each other, but still do because they have no choice, compete in the same presence of each other, where they get to explore their own ideas on what life is like or what life should be like, where you get to change your minds, you create rivalries, you create some tension that make it a lot harder for Will to make his final decision, or even to accept the fact that the past tragic events in his life can't be undone and he should focus on the more positive elements to it. You could have had Wong be this in-between moderator to show everything that he's learned on his own, let alone what he's learned from Will, especially since he's supposed to be his confidant. I don't know. I just, like most people, I wanted to love 9 Days and think that it was a much more mature version of Soul, and in some cases it is, but as overrated as Soul was for me personally, it was still a great movie because Pete Docter took every advantage that he could with such a great concept like this, and he knew which characters to focus on. The characters in this movie, for the most part, only get a relationship with Will. They all get equal screen time, but because they only get to know one person, it felt like I didn't get to, and they don't get to explore the world with each other, it felt like I didn't know that much about them, even though I've spent so much time with them. Bill Skarsgård playing the most normal character I've ever seen ever from him gets screwed over so many times for that exact reason, and he comes across as just being a bland person and not much else. And I don't know how useful this review is. I made it because I just wanted to get all this stuff off my chest. So many people were hyping this up as the greatest thing to come out of Sundance this year, and maybe I need to see it again. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not even going to grade this movie because if my thoughts are so scatterbrained, if I have so many great things about it and so many negatives to discuss, maybe I should check it out again. It really goes to show that sometimes you really do need to see something twice in order to fully embrace it and fully understand it. So maybe I will, but I just wanted to let my first impressions out of the gates so quickly. So in any case, guys, thanks as always for watching. If you have seen 9 Days, let me know in the comments below what you thought of it. Be sure to stay tuned for more reviews. Be sure to like and subscribe, and check out my other videos at Sharp Edge Cinematics. Take care.